So I think before we sort of talk about even the maintenance part of it, I think it's important to recognize that these results that we'll probably be talking about today are really building upon very impressive induction data where we saw placebo-adjusted treatment differences for the primary endpoint of clinical remission, which was quite substantial. And importantly, the onset of benefit of this drug, which is a once a day oral, was rapid with separation from placebo as early as 1 week for symptomatic response and week 2 for symptomatic remission. And then if we transition from that induction part and we go into the maintenance part, I think that there's several takeaways that we should take from it. First, this is a very large, clinically relevant program. Part one of the maintenance included 580 patients who had initially responded to that induction that I just talked about, and then entered into the randomized placebo controlled maintenance study. And then there was a part two in maintenance as well, which had an additional 633 patients who had either not responded initially or during induction or had subsequently lost response during the maintenance. And the other thing that's important for clinicians is to recognize that this study also included a substantial portion of patients who are difficult to treat. In particular, it enrolled the largest cohort of patients with an inadequate response to a JAK inhibitor that we've ever studied in phase 3 clinical trials. And this is particularly important because those patients or using JAK inhibitors in general tends to be later line of therapy. And we know that those patients don't respond as well as maybe naive patients or patients who are exposed just to monoclonal antibodies. Uh, so in part one, there were two of the maintenance. There were two maintenance doses, the 25 and 50 milligrams, and both the 25 and 50 milligrams of obefazimod met the primary endpoint of clinical remission at week 44. And the remission rates were quite high, approximately 51% with either active dose compared to only 10% in placebo. So this 40% difference, which is the largest placebo-adjusted difference that we've seen in a phase 3 trial. Part of that may have been due to the fact that the placebo rate was quite low, and that speaks usually to the difficult to treat patient population. In part two, in those initial non-responders or the patients who lost response, um, those patients sometimes are excluded, and we don't have a lot of information in them in other trials. But among those patients who had not responded during induction and then they continued on the 50 milligrams, so we're looking really at the 50 milligrams, about 37% of them achieved remission, about 60, over 60% achieved response. And patients who relapsed on the 25 during maintenance and were escalated to 50, clinical remission was recaptured in about 56%. So it's a lot of information, but the most compelling thing is that when we're looking at ulcerative colitis, we really want to look at objective data. And in ulcerative colitis, that objective data is endoscopic data and or histological data. I think for me, one of the most compelling findings was the endoscopic remission data. So to get into the trial, the patients needed a Mayo endoscopy score of either 2 or 3, signaling moderate to severe endoscopic disease. To achieve endoscopic remission, you needed to go all the way from that down to an endoscopic score of 0. So when we look in at it essentially looks normal. And this is important because this is a highly objective measure of drug efficacy. And it's one of the things in ulcerative colitis that I think is really unique is if you really want to know how well a drug does to control the disease, you look in and say, what does it look like? And in part one, the endoscopic remission rate was achieved in 41.5% of patients receiving the 25 milligram and almost 50% receiving the 50 milligram. And that compares to only 10% in placebo. So these are amongst the highest endoscopic remission rates that we've seen. And this strong endoscopic remission data really signifies or signals the potential of this drug in moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. So, both doses also met all their key secondary endpoints, including endoscopic improvement, histological endoscopic mucosal improvement, and steroid-free remission. And when we look at the safety over 44 weeks, we really don't see sort of any safety signals that were concerning. Yeah, I think that, I think the safety looks quite good. There were a few malignancies in the 50 milligram dose, and I think that that was a little bit misinterpreted. So, like when we're interpreting rare safety events such as malignancy, it's important not to focus solely on the raw numbers. So, these events were uncommon, and simple case counts can be really misleading, particularly when the amount of treatment exposure differs amongst groups. So when we go into maintenance, we have more exposure and we get a better idea of the safety. And so if you look, for example, at that 50 milligram group, that group had the greatest number or the greatest cumulative treatment exposure, and it also included many of the most treatment refractory patients. And when patients tend to receive a treatment or receive it for a longer period of time, we would naturally expect that there may be more events in one group rather than the other. So for the audience, the important thing is to look at exposure adjusted incident rates, and that's a more appropriate way to look at safety in general. So when this data, is digested by people when they see the data, and so if you look across both the phase two and the phase three program, there's over 1,700 patient adjusted years of exposure. And if we look at the rates of things that we may want to look at, such as non-melanotic skin cancer, the rate's really consistent with the published malignancy rates and ulcerative colitis. And specifically, when you look at things like there was a prostate cancer and a breast cancer in the 50 milligram dose. But those are not rare cancers. They weren't people where we would expect it. And certainly the available data doesn't suggest a dose-dependent malignancy signal with obefazimod. So, of course, I think overall, I think that this is a very, very safe therapy from the data that we have. We have data from phase two trials going out beyond 4 years now. And if you look at what I just talked about as far as the benefit of the therapy versus what we're seeing for safety, it has a very favorable benefit to safety signal.